think, right, so this meeting is being recorded and it has just begun. And I am thrilled that we were able to get Mary Okiki all the way from Point Roberts, Washington, which happens to be, I didn't know of it until pretty recently, a little part of the United States that you can only get into from Canada. It is 22 miles, I think, south of Vancouver, British Columbia, and quite a bit north of Bellingham, but you can only get into it by crossing the border and going through Canada and down. So interesting. Take a look at it at the map at some point. So Mary works, she's worked for different environmental organizations, and she grew up in Western Pennsylvania, has a long interest in environmental issues, has been working on this agricultural policy, the California perspective, but it's a national, every 5 years or more, there's a new agricultural bill, which she'll tell us about, done at the national level. And the California League, she has worked with the California State League on that bill in terms of climate smart agriculture and food action policy. So we will take questions at the end, and we will have a very lively discussion, I am sure. But meanwhile, Mary.
So thank you so much for having me here this evening. And I'm going to talk briefly about the Farm Bill. It's huge. I think the last one that was printed out was over 8,000 pages. We are not going to get into that. I'm really just going to highlight the key areas that the League of Women Voters at the U.S. level has taken action on, and then what we've done here in California, what some of the other states, which has echoed it, because the Farm Bill is a federal policy, a federal bill. So at the state level, we can't take any action without, of course, getting permission from the U.S. League. So I am the chair for the Food, Soil, and Ag team. We focus on educating League members about climate change and its relation to food and ag. And we support and advocate for actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve human and environmental health. And I encourage you to join us. At the end, there'll be a QR code, as well as you see my email there. Feel free to email me at any time. So if everyone can hear me, I'm going to dive in. I apologize in advance if my dogs go off. I'm actually not home. My home is in Palo Alto, California. I'm up here on vacation visiting family. So if they'll go off, I'll just mute for a minute until we get them quieted. Okay, so sorry about that. And we should go. Okay, great. So let's get started on the Farm Bill. As you said, it's renewed about every 4 to 5 years is what it's renewed. And it is up for renewal right now. In fact, it has actually expired. It expired at the end of September, but it's been funded through, because the programs haven't really changed or don't change. They will change with new legislation, but the funding has continued and will continue through mid-January. But of course, we need to get the government up and going and keep it going. And we've got to get a new Farm Bill in place. The hope is before the end of the year, but maybe into 2024. So what is the Farm Bill? Well, the Farm Bill is a huge piece of legislation that governs many areas related to agriculture, forestry, and food. It's an omnibus bill, and that means that it contains many smaller appropriation bills. And each of these appropriation bills appropriate or allocate funding to different programs and agencies. And so when you bundle them all together, what you can do is you can approve it all at once with a single vote. And then that's in place for the next 4 to 5 years until it comes up again. Now, this is a lot of money at stake with the Farm Bill. In the 2018 Farm Bill, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that it was going to cost about $428 billion to fund the programs over 5 years. I think it was more than that because of the additional funding that happened during the pandemic and increase in SNAP benefits and other things. And the 2023 Farm Bill is looking to cost even a lot more than that. So there are a lot of players who get involved in this. Okay, very brief history. So 1933 was when the first Farm Bill was signed, and that was under FDR and part of his New Deal program. Is we were still in the height of the Depression, and farmers in particular were hit hard. And the Farm Bill goals were to keep prices fair, ensure adequate food supply, and protect and sustain the nation's natural resources. Those three goals have not changed. And by the way, it's not really a new Farm Bill that comes up every year. It's a reauthorization of the Farm Bill. It shows up as a different name, different policies, but it's basically been going on since 1933. What also happened that same year was the Civilian Conservation Corps opened its first soil erosion control camp. Now, why? Well, the Dust Bowl is really what brought about enacting this, which came about from agricultural practices at the time, which didn't focus on soil health, though for centuries around the world, we had known the importance of soil health, but had overcultivated and overgrazed the lands. So combine that with a historic drought and an economic downturn, and it was truly a disaster. There was truly Dust Bowl, which was the soil, was blowing everywhere. Congress stepped in, and this is important, and why I put this up here is that in 1935, Congress declared that soil erosion was a menace to the national welfare. So the loss of soil and the depletion of water quality was a menace to national welfare. And from that, they created the Soil Conservation Service, which is still in place today, but it's now known as the NCRS, or the Natural Conservation Resource Corps. And they were to go out, provide technical assistance to enable farmers, foresters to maintain their soil health, essentially. We are still working on this 90 years later. It's not a quick fix, but it's something that needs to be done, and it needs to be maintained. Oh, I managed to miss a slide. There we go. Here it is. Okay. So this is, so what is actually in the Farm Bill? Well, the Farm Bill has 12 different titles to it. And as you can see, more than 99% of the funding goes to 4 different titles. I encourage everyone to go to the USDA website, just type in Farm Bill titles, and you'll get a short summary, which is about 8 pages, of what these little things are. And that's not going into any of the details. Today, we're going to talk very briefly about SNAP, because the League of Women Voters has done action on that, as well as then on the conservation. And that's going to be predominantly what I talk about today. We're not going to discuss crop insurance and commodities today, though that is something of an issue, and people talk a great deal about that, but we're not going to hit on those today. So the first thing is SNAP. So SNAP benefits, what is that? That is the Supplemental Nutrition Program, Nutrition Assistance Program. It used to be known, maybe some of you know it better, as food stamps. When I was in school, that's what they were called. It was called food stamps, and it's not called that anymore. And it's a huge amount, but how many people actually get those? Well, it's 1 in 8 people in the United States receive SNAP benefits in 2022, or no, 2021, excuse me. That's what I have the data from. That's 12% of the US population is food insecure. In order to qualify for SNAP benefits, you have to be low enough, your income has to be quite low, and that you need food assistance, so you're not food insecure. What's interesting is here in California, we also had 1 in 8 families, 1 in 8 people needed receive SNAP benefits in 2021. That was down significantly because during the pandemic, our food insecurity level skyrocketed to 20%. But that's about 12% of Californians receive SNAP benefits. California also has an additional program that they will double the value through a Market Fresh program of these SNAP benefits. And that's if you go to a farmer's market that is participating in that. And that's really to encourage people to eat healthy foods. It also supports the farmers. Now, who are these people who are getting them? I frequently hear about this as an entitlement program, but I need to point out that the USDA projects that for every dollar that is put into SNAP, it generates $1.5 in economic activity within the region. The other thing is many of the recipients, two categories frequently come up. One are the elderly, because as the cost of living, the cost of food goes up and people are on fixed incomes, The elderly need additional assistance. And in fact, there are many elderly who are not getting SNAP benefits who would qualify. And then a second group is U.S. military, U.S. active military servicemen. The Department of Defense said, I think it was 2022, that they had 1 in 4 active servicemen were food insecure, and that does not include their spouses or their children. So what did we do about SNAP? And I'm sorry the slide was previous, but so we've done 2 things at the U.S. level, which is that in August, the U.S. joined more than 250 other groups urging ag leadership to protect and strengthen SNAP. They urge them to invest in rural childcare access and maternal health. And it falls under gender justice because a disproportionate number of the people who receive SNAP benefits are women and children, and it's for numerous reasons. So that was in August of 2023. The other thing that the U.S. did is that they signed on to a letter urging, and just in September, urging Congress to support the Enhanced Access to SNAP Act. And what that is, that's for college students who have very low income. And one of the requirements is that you have to be in work, studying and working at least 20 hours a week before you can qualify for SNAP benefits. And this program is saying, hey, let's not have that. Let's not have that. So those are the 2 things that I've done and we've done. I encourage people to go onto the website, the League's website, and just look them up and look at the letters and see what they did and who those letters went to. All right, so that's about all I'm going to say about the SNAP benefits. The main point today is to talk about conservation, climate change, and the environment. So we did sign on to a letter back in February 2023 urging Congress to support environmental investments in the 2023 Farm Bill. Specifically, it was regarding the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act committed $19.5 billion to climate smart agriculture and conservation. The League joined 650 other organizations. This is a huge deal. And those organizations ranged from farming groups to doctors, to nurses, to teachers, you name it. Everybody was on this because it's so important. And I'm going to remind people, back in 1933, we recognized the importance of soil health. Well, actually, we recognized the importance of investing in soil health. It's been recognized way before then. And here we are 90 years later, still talking about it. And why? It's because these programs are the first ones that get cut, and they're always oversubscribed. That means they have more people who are qualified to receive the assistance than they have money. And so we're going to talk about that. So a little bit about U.S. agriculture. All right, so more than 50% of our U.S. land area is used for agriculture. People seem to be stunned by that, but that's considering grazing, and that one also includes logging or timber harvesting as well. Obviously, our agriculture is essential for food security here in the U.S. and around the world. We are what's considered a super producer. The United States produces tons of food, and many other nations rely on us for that food. It's a major source of income. It's huge economic activity, $1.264 trillion in 2021. It's also a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. People tend to be surprised by this. But the world, the IPCC said that the world food production system is responsible for about 30%, no, about 35% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Very, very little of that is from transportation. This 11%, that's only looking at the production. The 36% that the IPCC says also looks at food waste. What else do we know about farming? Well, it degrades water and air quality via pesticide and nutrient runoff. There's a loss of habitat for wildlife, biodiversity, and topsoil. Again, think back the dust storms from the 1930s. And by the way, we still have dust storms from farming. In Illinois, I sent it out to, if you were on the team or on just the email list, you would have gotten this article about Illinois. Just May 1st of this past year, they had 30 to 40 mile per hour winds. Dust storm kicked up from the farms nearby because they're still wrestling with this issue. They've had a drought, 84 car pileup on the highway. I think it was about 13 people died in that. It's an excellent article if you'd like to read more. They did a very in-depth article about why that's happening. So 90 years later, we're still having dust storms. Nothing like what we had in the 1930s, but we're still wrestling with this. So, and as you can see, the big thing is also this agriculture impacts climate change. Agriculture has also been impacted by climate change. We've seen them, the news, the droughts, the floods, everything. And the farmers need help. All right, California agriculture. So this is a talk for California, but we produce more than 400 commodities. We produce 1/3 of the nation's vegetables that are produced here and nearly 3/4 of the fruits and nuts. Needless to say, we are the leading agricultural state. Our croplands take up 24.2 million acres, or about 23% of our land, although we're actually losing land since we've had to put some land to fallow because of the drought and the subsidence that has come from groundwater pumping. It produced $51 billion, which went towards our GDP. And the next leading state was at 34 billion, and that was the state of Iowa. California's agriculture is also a source of greenhouse gas emissions, and it produces about 8% of our greenhouse. It's responsible for about 8% of our greenhouse gas emissions. I want to spend a minute on the greenhouse gas emissions because there's a reason that they call the conservation funding under the Inflation Reduction Act for climate smart ag and conservation. And it's climate smart because there's a focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm just going to spend a minute on that. As I said, agriculture emits about 11% of our greenhouse gas emissions. It is the single largest source of methane in the United States. Methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. It has 25 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. Now, there are only 5 countries that are responsible for 1/2 of all the anthropogenic, or that's the man-made sources of methane emissions. And of course, the United States is one of those 5 nations, right? It actually produces more methane than what comes from, the current estimates are that come from the natural gas industry. It is also the largest source of nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide has 300 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide, which is pretty stunning. And in 2018, US was the 3rd largest emitter of nitrous oxide. So if we can get these emissions down because of the high global warming potential of these over a short time period, we can actually have a really big impact on reducing our greenhouse gas. Reducing our greenhouse gases and meeting some of our goals. And the good news is that with climate smart agriculture, climate conservation practices, we can actually reverse this process. We can take our lands from being greenhouse gas emitters, turn them into carbon sinks. Now, this is not going to happen overnight, and this is not a cure-all. I think it's very important to state that. Many people get very excited, and they're saying, oh, regenerative ag, we can do it all. No, it's going to take time, but it needs to be done. It's important not just for greenhouse gases, but for clean water, clean air, for all the other reasons as well. This is one prong of the climate solution. It's an important prong, but it's only one prong. Okay, so what can we do with conservation and climate smart agricultural benefits? I've mentioned most of these, but we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's key. You reduce water runoff, and you can also reduce the water use. We'll talk a little bit briefly about California's Climate Smart Agriculture program, including the SWEEP program, which is particularly targeted towards reducing water use and has been very successful. Increase of biodiversity, improve soil health, and increase productivity. You hear a lot about people talking about increasing carbon sequestration in the soil, and I want to take just one brief minute to discuss that, which is we are obviously a carbon-based planet. Carbon is the basis of all life. So carbon is in our soils. As we know, we take the carbon that's been stored over time under great pressure for millions of years. We take it out in the form of coal or natural gas and burn that. So that's one form of carbon. But organic carbon is also in our soils. It's in our oceans, it's in our soils, it's in the water, it's everywhere. And when we deplete our soils, we're actually removing the carbon from it, the organic carbon, and then you have nothing. You have no life. You have nothing in that soil. So if you bring back soil health, what you're doing is you're taking some of the carbon that's already in our cycle and you're removing it from the atmosphere and you're putting it back where it belongs, which is in the soil. So in fact, when the Biden administration announced their initiative to invest in climate smart agriculture, they stated that they felt that they believe recent studies had shown that we could possibly meet 30% of our greenhouse gas reduction goals through this program, through agriculture. So briefly, at the federal level, we have the USD conservation programs. I'm just going to go through these quickly because I want you to hear the names so that when you hear them again or you read them again, you'll be reminded, oh, this is part of the USDA conservation programs. So we have the environmental quality incentives programs, and that helps farmers and ranchers and forest landowners integrate conservation into the working lands. A farm is a working land. You may also hear or read about that. Regional conservation partnership programs that enables the coordination of what was the Soil Conservation Service. It's now the NRCS conservation activities with also regional partners. The Conservation Stewardship Program, and that's for conservation. That one varies by state. And then, of course, we have the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. That one is actually also very popular. We call it SALP here, Sustainable Agricultural Land Program in California. And that one's very interesting because when we hear about land loss and agriculture taking over, they're really talking about places like Brazil and areas where they're taking down forests to put in agricultural lands, and then you're losing a great deal of carbon sequestration. Here in the United States, we're actually losing agricultural land.
You can take
So as we lose land, and we don't want to do that because once we lose it, it tends to go towards development. Once it goes to development, then you're not going to get the natural resources back. You're not going to get the benefits, which include storing of carbon.
Wealthy thing.
I want it under my butt.
And the from that. So what that does is it allows farmers to put an easement out there, and they're not going to use it for agricultural at this time, but it's being held there and it won't be used for development. So if it's needed at a later date, then it can be. I'm going to give one example and to show you the importance of this and why there were 650 other organizations who signed on to this. So the nutrient management program, it's been around forever. It's one of the oldest programs, I think, under EQIP. And it is 89. So this is just recently, I just looked this up recently, 89 million acres of cropland. This is all from USDA, or almost 30% of our total US cropland, so our agricultural fields, have nitrogen levels that are higher than the allowable thresholds. There is permitting involved with this, and we do have targets for what, how much nitrogen, how high the nitrogen levels should be, how many nutrients should be placed on their fertilizers. 75% of our US nitrous oxide emissions are from soil management practices. Now, I think it's important to remember that soil is a natural, that farming deals with nature. So you're dealing with, it's complicated. It's both a science and an art. I have a cousin who's a farmer, and you're at the whim of both the, what's happening with the soils, what's happening with the environment, what's happening with the weather this year. So it's tough to get that exactly right. But they've shown, they did one study that said, look, if we can invest some money into this nutrient management program and get farmers the technical assistance and equipment they need to be monitoring these at a fine level, we're going to accomplish three things. We're going to save farmers about $30 an acre. That's in the amount of additives they will not need to add to those. They're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because it's going to need less nitric oxide being produced, and they're going to greatly improve water quality. So I want people to just think about the scope of that 90 million acres and how much we could lower greenhouse gas emissions if we have this funding, we keep the funding that was already allocated, and we help farmers adjust to climate change, and they can help by reducing greenhouse gases as well. So California has a very advanced program. It started back in 2014, and they called it Climate Smart Ag. Now, forgot to mention Climate Smart. What is that? That is simply the name that has now been accepted and is generally used to describe these programs. And it means that they're good for the soil. It focuses on two things: soil health and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. They haven't come up with a really clear definition, and that's because then we can make it more encompassing in terms of, you know, what's going to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and then what's going to improve soil health. So that's used both in the United States and internationally, that term. But many of the practices are practices that go back before the 1930s, such as low or no-till. But California has 5 programs. SWEEP, which is the statewide water efficiency program, and that focuses on water use reduction. It had enormous success with that, both reducing water use, which I think is I see Jane Wagner's here, so I think she's going to be happy that that one's being done. That reduces the amount of water that the agricultural lands are using. Healthy Soils program, obviously that's about improving healthy soils. Alternative manure management. And we have Climate Smart Ag Technical Assistance Program. That one's huge because that's the technical assistance, provides the technical assistance that farmers and ranchers need. That now is being managed through the UC State School System graduate programs. It's really a fantastic program. And then I had mentioned earlier about our easement program. And these are connected to the federal programs in the sense that they piggyback off each other. So California, of course, having as much agricultural land as we do, and really we've hit, because of our microclimates, much of climate change has hit California a little bit sooner and a little bit harder than it's hit some of the other states. We knew that was going to happen. So they've been planning for this and to maintain our agricultural industry. Although, as I said, and I think as everybody knows, we've had to fallow a great deal of land through because of the overdrafting of groundwater that has happened. So who's implementing this? Well, as I said, it's being done at the federal level. It's being done at the international level. This is now just the word that we can use to describe it. It's also called Healthy Soils. There's a great interactive map that you can go and you can look up for your state. If not everybody here is from California. I know we sent this out to the U.S. Food, Soil, and Ag team, and find out what's going on at your state level, find out how you can support it, and again, at the federal level. There's Climate Smart Commodities. It's some pretty actually exciting things. So, but what are the local leagues doing? We saw what the National League did, which is the National League has signed on to 3 letters in support of the Farm Bill. 2 dealt with SNAP and 1 dealt with maintaining this $19.5 billion. But what are the local leagues doing? Well, local leagues, particularly across California, are educating members about climate smart agriculture. They're telling them what it is, whether it's low-till, no-till, whether it's using drip irrigation instead of spray irrigation, a whole range of practices. They're learning about agriculture and food systems within their state and communities, and then they support local and state initiatives to support and fund climate smart ag. At the state level, we have in the past supported, the state league has supported funding for these programs. One fun way to do it is to simply watch one of the 2 movies that have been out about it, The Biggest Little Farm and Kiss the Ground, or can give you an overview of what can be done with this. What else is being done? What the state level action is also happening. So remember, if you want to take action at the state level, you need to it needs to go through the through the US league. And that's why you've got the purple in the background there. So the League of Women Voters of Iowa is actually the one who took the letter to the league back in January or February. And after they looked at it, they said, yeah, we're going to sign on to this letter with the other 650 organizations. Iowa, as I said, is the 2nd largest agricultural state, producing about $34.9 billion in revenue. The League of Massachusetts then said, hey, we've got to get in on this. They created a toolkit. They had a webinar, and they sent out a state action alert, which echoed the message from the National letter to support the investment in the $19.5 billion. In fact, they just sent out a second action alert, and they're, I think, 49th when it comes to agricultural lands, but they're on it. They're also very interested in the forestry aspect of it. There is funding in there for forestries. They were trying to maintain their forest up there, and there's a little fighting going on with the solar industry as well. So the League of Women Voters, it's the UMR, which is the Upper Mississippi River Region. They were actually formed. One of the main reasons they were formed was to address together the agricultural runoff that happens in the Upper Mississippi River there. And it consists of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. I believe Missouri has just joined them, but isn't officially there. They held a fantastic Farm Bill webinar, which I can provide the link to. And then they also issued statewide action alert, all 4 states again, echoing the same message from the National League. The League of Women Voters of California also issued an action alert, asking everybody to contact the federal reps, the Senate and congressional representatives, to tell them to maintain this funding. We need this funding. And I'm going to be curious, because I'm going to wonder how many people here knew about the action alert, how many of you took action, and if you didn't take action, why not? We did discover a few things from that. One is, if you want to do an action alert, you need to make sure everyone's signed up to get them. And also, too, you can also get your local league to give it a little boost and send a reminder out about that. Also, at the federal level, 2 more states will be putting a request, or have already put in a request, to be able to send out that same action alert at the state level to say, okay, let's echo the message. And this is important because they are still discussing the Farm Bill. It's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. There's big pushback to take that $19.5 billion away, even though it came from the Inflation Reduction Act. The funding is there, but they want to put it elsewhere. So we're going to see what happens, but obviously many people are trying their best to keep it. Let's see. I think my touchscreen just stopped. Let me get my little mouse here and click to the next one. Okay. There we go. Okay. That is something else that is also going on here at the state level. And well, we missed my last slide. Oh, well. So the last thought that I want to leave you with is, I want to remind people that the soil health farming is so important for the United States, for the world. Soil health, we've been working on this since the 1930s. We need to keep working on it. It's not something where it's one and done. It's something kind of like your roof. You need to just keep repairing it and fixing it. At some point, you don't replace it. You don't replace things in the agriculture industry, but you can't just leave it alone. You need to be investing and reinvesting in soil health. I encourage everyone, please join us. That's the QR code. I'm happy to take. That was just a brief overview. There's, as I said, 8,000 pages, but I thought people would also enjoy a conversation about this.